Pretty busy tonight. Tulsi Graaff, good to have you with us here this evening.
Great to be here.
And lovely as well. We said just before the show, we swapped chairs with Tulsi because you're on a different chair now.
I'm on a small chair, so I'm not hovering above everybody.
Because I was sort of perched up here and then we swapped chairs, but you look like you're quite comfortable.
I'm very comfortable and your height now, so that's good.
Thank you, my love. Well, great to have you with us. Just for our new friends who are joining us on the show, your background.
My background, well, I've got a law and psychology background, and for the last 7 years I've been working with my business, which is called Lead Your Own Change, and so I do a lot of work with organisations and individuals. A lot is around conflict resolution, communication skills, dealing with change. So I do, mediations, coaching, and workshops.
So a lot of people who are finding themselves even out of work, not too sure where they're going, they're at crossroads, and this is where it affects the confidence. Is this where you step in?
Yeah, look, it's part of what I do. I definitely do a lot of work with confidence, and I love doing that because I think that there are some, relatively small things that we can do that can make a big difference to feeling better about sort of our life and how we manage things.
Yes, and once the confidence goes, everything else starts to erode, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people that I speak to, they almost see confidence as like a magic button that, I need to, like, you press it and I have confidence, or I need confidence to be able to do things.
Yes.
But in fact, from my perspective, it's more about I need courage to take the action that will give me the confidence.
Is that the number one solution?
Well, I think what it is it's really important to recognise that when we're doing something new or something that overwhelms us, we are unlikely to feel confident.
Yes.
And so it's the small steps that we take in action that will give us the confidence.
You just made me think there for a minute too, because you're quite physical, so you love exercise.
Where did you get that from?
Well, I got the impression that you were doing a lot of walking.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, at my best, that is true.
No. You are a basketball player.
Oh, well, yes.
Excuse me.
I was trying to be a basketball player.
And a very good one at that.
I don't know where you're getting all these
Our conversations together, Tulsi.
Well, okay, so I'm 46 now. I decided that I wanted to, once in my life, play a team sport. So
at the age of 46?
Yes, that's right. So, actually I was 45 at the time. So I joined a women's basketball team and learnt it last year. I got one season in and then I broke my finger. So I'm having to reevaluate it. But I mean, it's interesting that you bring that example up because for me, one of the I was actually experiencing my own barriers around getting fit. And so a lot of the work I do with people as well is you kind of take a step back and think, okay, you've got some goals, say you want to get fit, and it's not happening. What is stopping you from doing it? Maybe there's another way you can do it. So for me, I thought, well, okay, so what's something that I could feel passionate about that might make the difference? So I joined the basketball team and I actually wanted to go walking and running and doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
You know how you give people confidence and you lead the change. Did you go through a crisis and realise I'm stuck in a vortex, I need to change myself?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I mean, it's interesting because...
Or did you reach crossroads when you said, that's not working for me anymore, I've got to move on? Because it happens to everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know that there was a particular sort of crisis point, but I think, for all of us, life is a work in progress. So at different times we experience challenge and things are hard, and then we have to take a step back and think, okay, what's happening here and what can I do differently that might make a difference? And for me, it's often small steps that can make a big difference.
Yes, and we had Margot Cairns on, hello Margot, a couple of weeks ago, who was talking about tumultuous change, which is going to affect nearly every industry. And we're seeing single-handedly where the internet is just wiping out these industries, and she's saying, get ready. But we're not too sure how we're going to get ready, are we, really? We're just accepting bit by bit.
Her way of saying to get ready is to learn how to adapt to change. So, a lot of people are, becoming redundant, are having to spread out their job skills. They're going, they're finding that, maybe they studied IT at university and by the time they graduate, that form of, technology is redundant. There's a whole lot of things changing, whereas like when I grew up, you could basically study one thing and you could get in that job, and a lot of people stayed in that job forever. Things, you know, that whole, you know, paradigm has completely changed. And I think the thing that you say about courage really measured up with what Margot was saying. Courage is the most important thing. Take that step, you know, because you don't know if you're going to have the confidence until you actually get in there, get your hands dirty and have a go.
Now, how many of us on this table would be prepared to grasp, and even our friends at home, I thought about this yesterday, would you be prepared to study another language?
I've been thinking about doing that.
Yeah, me too.
Because apparently it changes the brain synapses, and it's a very important way of deterring any sort of you know, mental decline as you age.
Yes.
And because my mother suffered from dementia, it's very important to me to do everything that I can. And learning a new language is apparently one of the number one ways to avoid developing dementia in our elder years.
Well, that's, I mean, I think all those kind of suggestions, even learning a language or taking some different steps that give you confidence is a great way forward. I think one example that stands out for me is a lot of people have a fear of public speaking. So sometimes it can be really helpful to think about some small steps that you can take to get a little more confident. But you have to be really careful when you are trying to get to develop confidence, not to overwhelm yourself. An example I have is, you know, one of my clients, before she came to me, she had this terrible fear of public speaking. So she joined a really full-on public speaking workshop, and
Tony Robbins style public, like she had to walk across fire before she did a presentation.
Well, it created so much fear in her that it did the exact opposite. So we need to remember that we have to be gentle with ourselves and accept what's happening for us with that fear, and then think about, okay, what's something small that I can do that will build that confidence up gradually?
Yes, that's a good point. And I've done a lot of public speaking, and I really, initially, because I've always been on air, it didn't really throw me. When you see a live audience, and there'll probably be a few friends who are tackling that course, to do a public speaking course, and I think even I would like to still continue to do it, because you can always learn something. Some people in the audience are going to really be into what you're doing, and yet there's others who are there who are not quite sure of you, and their facial expressions are justifying that.
When you're doing the public speaking,
Yeah,
and you're looking at
others
the
will
audience.
hate what you're doing, and some are like this going, yeah, right.
But isn't that right? don't they say that, what is it, something like 70% of people, you know, are going to be or not even like you? That you can't expect everybody to have a positive response to it.
Yes,
so you're attached to that response. And I think that goes back to fear and, once again, lack of confidence.
But I also think there's another aspect of that is how we interpret people's responses. So we might consider
great.
something personal to us. So you have that example of a person looking at their clock and looking, you know, not very interested in you, but they might be having a challenging time themselves. So we can often put our own interpretations, and we have to be careful, because that can almost confirm some negative thoughts we have about ourselves.
Oh, look, totally, and I see where you're going there. It's very interesting, but I always found it amusing.
Yes.
But if I'm talking to a live audience, I try and go to as many people as I can in a live audience to make them feel involved. Mike Walsh, a one-time famous TV presenter, said the moment that your audience starts coughing, and I've been watching this for years, and it does happen, when your audience starts coughing, they're bored.
Don't cough.
Or they start sneezing.
You know, it's going to throw one out there. What about sneezing?
Without any further ado, I think we better move on before we go into a coughing fit.
I do want to bring up is you, I think, are creating a whole new paradigm of conflict resolution. I've seen you doing this work. I think conflict resolution, you take the traditional methodologies of conflict resolution, but then you've added a whole new spin to it, and I think it's your intuition that you've put with it. But I've never seen anyone be able to mediate between people that have actually wanted to kill each other in a room before, and I've actually seen Tulsi do this and simmer it down, like she's basically put a fire hose on them and stopped it in seconds. I don't know what it is about how you approach it or what you do, whether it's just your demeanour. I know it's very much to do with who you are as a person, but that's a whole other level.
Thanks, Viv.
You're
well,
welcome.
I think it's also because I love the work, and I know that when you get human beings together and you help them to kind of take a step back and take stock about what's going on and have a look at potentially where there are points of agreement and work with them, sometimes this, magic can happen. And I feel that too. I don't even know how to explain at different times, but it's like getting into the zone, and I just love the work that I do. So I feel very grateful to be able to do it.
Well, so do our viewers, Tulsi, and lovely to have you with us back tonight. And Sarah has written in, and she would like to direct a question to you, if you could answer, please. I had a very difficult relationship with my parents and had to stop seeing them because of how toxic it was. I'm trying to work out and get my life back on in order again, but every time I have the idea about doing a course at TAFE that I'm interested in, I can hear my parents' voices in my head saying, "Oh, you're not studying to be a lawyer or a doctor, you're not good enough." And then I go to give up. How do I get rid of these voices in my head which keep haunting me?
Is this a common trait?
Look, Sarah, I think that's a really great question, because it's something that I see a lot of, that people are challenged by voices that they have, messages that they have been, they've been given from their past, from experiences potentially with their parents or bullies or sisters, brothers, boyfriends, girlfriends, that kind of thing. So you're not alone with that message that's in your head. And I can only imagine how it is for you, because the very people that brought you up and brought you into this world, you've had to make a decision to not have them in your life anymore. So that shows a lot of clarity and strength on your part, which I think is really important to recognise for yourself. That's a big achievement anyway. So as far as those voices go, now those voices, it's very, very tempting just to want to sort of shut them down and stop them. The unfortunate thing is, with a bit of therapy and coaching, look, it's possible that you can work with those voices a little bit more, maybe minimise them. But in general, really the best approach for you is to, rather than trying to get rid of them and feeling bad every time you hear them, is to accept that those voices will be with you. Like we all have different voices, but you don't have to listen to that voice. You can accept that that voice is there and acknowledge it, almost like an unwelcome friend. So a friend can walk in the door, an uninvited friend, and you can note that they're there, but you don't need to ask them to sit down. And then, there's probably a bit of work for you to do. Take stock around what are your own values, what is the voice that comes from your true heart, and really think about that voice and focus on that voice. So the next time the other voice comes to speak to you, the ones from your parents, you can say, okay, there it is, got it, I know it's there, I accept that that's part of me, I'll probably have that with me, potentially for the rest of my life, but that's okay, because I don't need to listen to it. I can listen to my own voice and support myself in, how I move forward in life.
Beautiful. Tulsi, before we just wrap up this segment, I've got one more question that I would like to ask you. And it's something that I see happening over and over again with myself and with friends and family. We see patterns in our lives, in relationships, in choices, in the way that we go about our work, whatever. It's kind of something that people seem to repeat. Do you have any advice on how people can break patterns? Say somebody continually chooses the same kind of person in a relationship. What's a bit of advice for them on how they can recognise that or change their behaviour?
Yeah, so look, I think the truth of it is change is difficult, but the wonderful thing about even talking about patterns is the fact that if we recognise that there is a pattern, that's our first opportunity to make that change. So without awareness, we can't make the change. So if we have that awareness about a particular pattern, and different times it's hard to get that awareness, it might require a bit of therapy or some deep and meaningfuls with some really trusted friends. But once we have that awareness that there is that pattern, then we have to really take a step back and think, where did that come from? And often we really are a product of the lives that we've lived from childhood. So that's, it can take quite a bit of time to think about where those messages have come and explore it so that we can work out how we do it differently.
Yeah, and I think a lot of patterns that are instilled in us are implanted in our childhood years. But my message is to a lot of people, don't be too hard on yourselves.
Yes.
And it's all too easy to turn to the drugs or to turn to drink. And I think now more than ever, or was it just as bad in the 40s or the 50s, even after the Second World War? Look how many people came back traumatised, and even after Vietnam. And it filtered through all of our lives, and we had to cope, didn't we?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, turned to the bottle. We didn't really have counselling or psychologists in those days. Not like we do now, but we did cope. And my message is to a lot of people, focus on those good things that are about you, because there's so many people that are everyone's talented in so many ways, and focus on those gifts.
Well, I think that there's 2 points you've made there which I think are really great. One is the importance of accepting where we are right now, because that's such a powerful thing. Because if we're feeling bad about where we are, then we can keep ourselves stuck and we're focusing on the negative. And the other thing that you mentioned, which I love, which I talk about a lot, is having gratitude for what you do have. Because when we focus on gratitude, it actually changes what's happening in our brain as well.
Yes.
So it can help us create more sort of positive stuff going on without getting technical.
Yes.
And it can shift things for us. So that acceptance and that gratitude, they're such powerful kind of first steps when we are trying to change.
And I think also too, you just made me think about something there, even though you didn't mention the phrase unconditional love. What affords us of that? A pet dog or a pet cat, could be a pet bird, but we love our pets, don't we?
Well, that's why I bring mine to studio every week. Lucy's in the control room.
Yes, but you had 2 dogs last week.
I did. I inherited my mum's puppy, so I
She's
now
having
have
the night
2.
off.
She's actually at puppy training for a whole week, overnight stays, because she hasn't learnt to pee outside yet.
But I think that's a great idea. I mean, what you're talking about, again, are sort of small steps that sometimes can really make a huge change for a person. So if someone is feeling low or challenged, and they can have an animal, I mean, animals, as you would know, the research really does show that it can make a big difference to a person's well-being.
And exercise as well. Well, Tulsi...
Walking.
Yes, too right, my dear. And you're going to be with us a little bit later on into the show.
Absolutely, looking
Topic
forward
of
to it.
discussion.